On a quiet summer night in July 2007, the peaceful town of Cheshire, Connecticut, became the scene of one of the most horrific crimes in American history. What began as a chance encounter at a supermarket would escalate into a 7-hour nightmare that claimed 3 innocent lives and exposed devastating failures in the criminal justice system. This is the story of the Petit family, a story of unimaginable terror, survival, and a community forever changed. But it's also a story that forces us to confront difficult questions about repeat offenders, parole systems, and whether justice was truly served. The Petit family represented the American dream. Dr. William Petit Jr. was a respected endocrinologist who had practiced in Plainville, Connecticut since 1989. Born on September 24, 1956, in Southington, Connecticut, William grew up in a family deeply involved in their community. His father ran a general store and served on the school board and town council. After graduating from Dartmouth College, William attended the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, where his life would change forever. In 1985, while working as a third-year medical student at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, he met Jennifer Hawk, a new oncology nurse at the same hospital. Their connection was immediate, and they married on April 13, 1985 in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Jennifer, born September 26, 1958 in Morristown, New Jersey, brought warmth and dedication to everything she did. She became the co-director of the health center at Cheshire Academy, a private boarding school where she was beloved by students and staff. Despite being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Jennifer never let her condition define her. Instead, she turned it into a cause that would inspire her entire family. The Petits had two daughters who were the pride of their lives. Haley Elizabeth, born October 15, 1989, was 17 years old in the summer of 2007. She had just graduated from the prestigious Miss Porter's School in Farmington, where she excelled in everything she touched. Haley ran varsity cross country, played basketball and crew, maintained a spot on the high honor roll, and was elected Athletic Association head, a senior leadership position. She had been accepted to Dartmouth College, her father's alma mater, where she planned to study medicine and continue the family legacy of service. But Haley's greatest passion was fighting multiple sclerosis in honor of her mother. She captained a walk MS team called Haley's Hope and won a school award for exceptional community service. Her dedication to this cause would become part of her lasting legacy. 11-year-old Michaela Rose Petit, born November 17, 1995, was the family's creative spirit. She attended Chase Collegiate School in Waterbury and loved cooking, often preparing elaborate meals for her family. On July 22, 2007, she went shopping with her mother to buy ingredients for a special dinner she planned to cook that evening. Michaela had already decided that when Haley left for college, she would take over the MS fundraising team and rename it Michaela's Miracle. The Petits were deeply embedded in their community. Their home on Sorghum Mill Road in Cheshire was a place of warmth, achievement, and hope. They had built a life that many would envy: successful careers, bright children, and a strong commitment to making the world better. But unknown to them, they had been noticed by two men who would destroy everything they had built. Joshua Komisarjevsky was 26 years old in 2007, with a history of burglary convictions and drug abuse. Born on August 10, 1980, he had been adopted by Ben and Jude Komisarjevsky into a family with deep ties to the arts. His grandfather was the renowned theater director Theodore Komisarjevsky. But Joshua's life had taken a dark turn. He had spent years in and out of the criminal justice system, and by July 2007, he was on parole. Stephen Hayes, 44 years old, had an even longer criminal record dating back to a burglary conviction in 1981 when he was still a teenager. Born on May 30, 1963, Hayes had spent much of his adult life cycling through the prison system. Court documents would later reveal a disturbing pattern of cruelty that began in childhood, including severe abuse toward his younger brother. The two men had met through a halfway house drug treatment program. Both were supposed to be under supervision, monitored by the parole system designed to protect the public. But on July 22, 2007, they were free to walk the streets of Cheshire, planning their next crime. Sunday evening, July 22, 2007, seemed like any other summer day. Jennifer Petit took 11-year-old Michaela to a local supermarket. Michaela was excited about the special dinner she planned to cook for her family. As they shopped for ingredients, they had no idea they were being watched. Joshua Komisarjevsky spotted them in the store. Later testimony and trial evidence would reveal that he followed Jennifer and Michaela from the supermarket back to their home on Sorghum Mill Road. He observed the family, their routine, their beautiful home. He saw opportunity. He saw targets. That evening, Komisarjevsky contacted Stephen Hayes. At 7:45 p.m., Hayes sent a chilling text message. "I'm chomping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon." Over the next hour and a half, between 8:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m., the two men exchanged texts that prosecutors would later use as evidence of premeditation. They were joking, planning, anticipating what they were about to do. Police later reported that the pair may have even gone shopping for implements, an air rifle, and rope after seeing the girls at the supermarket. They were methodically preparing for a home invasion. The Petit family went to sleep that night with no idea that two violent criminals had marked them for destruction. The exact timing of the initial entry remains somewhat disputed in official records. A Connecticut Supreme Court summary places the entry at around 2 a.m. on Monday, July 23rd. Other police reports and contemporaneous news coverage describe the break-in as occurring shortly after 3 a.m. What is clear is that Hayes and Komisarjevsky entered the Petit home in the early morning darkness. Dr. William Petit was sleeping on a couch on the first floor, having dozed off after watching television. He was suddenly awakened by a devastating blow to his head with a baseball bat they had found in the home. The attack was brutal and immediate. William was dragged to the basement, disoriented and bleeding. The intruders bound him with rope and pillowcases, ensuring he couldn't escape or call for help. They beat him repeatedly. Later medical evidence would document severe injuries, head trauma, facial fractures, and extensive bruising. But somehow, William remained conscious, trapped in his own basement while the nightmare unfolded upstairs. Jennifer and the two girls were herded into their bedrooms and tied to their beds. The intruders told them this was just a robbery, that if everyone cooperated, no one would be hurt. It was a lie that would be repeated throughout the ordeal, a cruel psychological tactic to maintain control while they methodically planned something far more sinister. For approximately 6 to 7 hours, the Petit family endured unimaginable terror. The intruders ransacked the house, searching for valuables, credit cards, bank information. They demanded to know where money was kept, what accounts the family had access to. All the while, they kept the family separated, bound, and terrified. At some point during this period, Stephen Hayes left the house and went to a nearby gas station. Surveillance video captured him purchasing $10 worth of gasoline in containers taken from the Petit garage. This wasn't for a getaway vehicle. It was for something far more horrific. As morning broke on July 23rd, the situation escalated into its most critical phase. The intruders had decided to force Jennifer to go to the bank and withdraw money. It was around 9 a.m. when Stephen Hayes drove Jennifer to the Bank of America on Maplecroft Plaza in Cheshire, holding her hostage in her own vehicle. Jennifer knew she was in grave danger. She knew her family was being held in the home, but she also saw an opportunity to get help. When she entered the bank, she managed to communicate to bank personnel that something was desperately wrong. The bank manager immediately recognized the danger Jennifer was in. At 9:21 a.m., while Jennifer was still at or near the teller window, the bank manager called 911. He tracked Jennifer's movements in real time, updating the dispatcher as she completed the forced withdrawal. At 9:25 a.m., the dispatcher relayed critical details to a supervising officer. 1 minute later, at 9:26 a.m., a broadcast went out to all Cheshire police units with vehicle information and the license plate number. The wheels of law enforcement were now in motion. Police were dispatched toward both the bank area and the Petit residence. But for the family trapped inside the house, time was running out. When Hayes returned to the house with Jennifer and the withdrawn money, the situation inside had already deteriorated beyond imagination. While Hayes had been at the bank, Komisarjevsky had assaulted Michaela. He had taken explicit photographs with his cell phone, evidence that would later be crucial in proving the depraved nature of these crimes. Jennifer was also assaulted. The medical examiner would later confirm that both mother and youngest daughter had been victimized in the most horrific ways possible. The intruders had never intended to simply rob the family and leave. They had planned something far more permanent. The men knew police were likely coming. The bank manager's call had started a countdown they couldn't stop. Rather than flee and abandon their victims alive, Hayes and Komisarjevsky made a decision that would seal their fate as two of the most hated criminals in Connecticut history. They doused the house with the gasoline Hayes had purchased. They poured it around the beds where Haley and Michaela lay tied and helpless. Then they set the house on fire. Jennifer Hawk Petit, 48 years old, didn't die in the flames. She was strangled to death, a final act of violence before the fire could consume her. Her daughters, 17-year-old Haley and 11-year-old Michaela, died from smoke inhalation as the flames spread rapidly through the home. They were conscious when the fire started. They knew they were going to die. In the basement, Dr. William Petit was still bound but conscious. The smell of smoke filtered down to him. He could hear the sounds above. Summoning strength he didn't know he had, despite his severe injuries, William managed to free himself from his restraints. He crawled to a basement window, kicked it open, and escaped to a neighbor's yard. He collapsed on their porch, bloody and barely conscious, but alive. Cheshire police arrived at the Petit residence to a scene of chaos. The house was visibly burning. Just as they arrived, they saw two men exit the house and get into a vehicle in the driveway. These were Hayes and Komisarjevsky, attempting to flee the scene of their crimes. What happened next unfolded in seconds. The suspects started the vehicle and began to back out. Police moved to block their exit. Rather than surrender, the suspects rammed their vehicle into multiple police cruisers, trying desperately to escape. But the collisions disabled their vehicle. They were trapped. At gunpoint, both Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky were taken into custody. They were arrested at the scene while firefighters rushed to battle the blaze, consuming the Petit home. When firefighters finally suppressed the fire and could safely enter, they discovered what everyone had feared. 3 bodies were found inside. Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela had all perished. The only survivor was Dr. William Petit, who had been transported to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Multiple scenes had to be secured. The bank where Jennifer had made her desperate silent plea for help, the burning home where 3 women had died, and the collision site where the suspects had been arrested. The Cheshire Police Department, Connecticut State Police Central District Major Crime Squad, and the State Fire Marshal's Office all responded to what had become one of the most heinous crimes in Connecticut history. The investigation that followed built an overwhelming case against both perpetrators. Text messages between Hayes and Komisarjevsky from the night before the crime showed clear premeditation. Their joking, anticipatory messages about getting started demolished any defense that this had been a burglary that spontaneously escalated. The cell phone belonging to Joshua Komisarjevsky contained photographs that were almost too disturbing to describe. Digital images showed the victims bound and included explicit photos of the assault of Michaela. Technology expert John Farnham testified about these images at trial, and they became crucial evidence linking Komisarjevsky directly to the assault charges. Bank surveillance video showed Hayes with Jennifer during the forced withdrawal. Gas station surveillance showed Hayes purchasing the gasoline shortly before the arson. The timeline was airtight. Medical examiner Wayne Carver provided testimony about the causes of death. Jennifer had been strangled. Haley and Michaela had died from smoke inhalation, their bodies found in their burned beds where they had been tied. The physical evidence from the fire scene showed ropes, restraints, and the accelerant patterns that proved arson. Perhaps most damning, laboratory officials testified that blood samples showed neither Hayes nor Komisarjevsky had alcohol or illegal drugs in their systems. There was no intoxication defense. They had been completely aware of their actions. On Tuesday, July 24, 2007, just 1 day after the murders, both suspects were arraigned in Meriden Superior Court. The state announced charges including kidnapping, burglary, arson, robbery, larceny, and assault. Each was held on $15 million bond. By Thursday, July 26, 2007, prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. Both men were formally charged with 6 capital felony counts, charges that made them eligible for execution under Connecticut law at the time. Stephen Hayes went to trial first. His trial began on September 13, 2010, more than 3 years after the crime. On October 5, 2010, the jury found him guilty on all counts. On November 8, 2010, the jury recommended the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Judge John Blue formally sentenced Hayes to death. Joshua Komisarjevsky's trial began on September 19, 2011. On September 22, jurors heard his recorded confession. On September 28, they saw the text messages and heard medical examiner testimony about evidence of Michaela's assault. His defense team presented evidence of the abuse Komisarjevsky had suffered, hoping for mitigation in sentencing. The jury was unmoved. Komisarjevsky was also found guilty and sentenced to death. Both men would sit on Connecticut's death row, their appeals dragging through the courts while Dr. William Petit tried to rebuild a shattered life. The Petit murders became a watershed moment for Connecticut. On July 28, 2007, just 5 days after the murders, thousands attended a memorial service where Dr. William Petit eulogized his family. A community gathered at Central Connecticut State University to mourn 3 lives taken too soon. In the months that followed, the outpouring of support was extraordinary. On January 6, 2008, the Cheshire Lights of Hope event saw more than 130,000 luminaria candles lit in memory of Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela. The Petit Family Foundation was established to continue the charitable work, especially the MS advocacy that had meant so much to the family. Then came an unexpected turn. On April 25, 2012, Connecticut enacted legislation that prospectively repealed the death penalty for crimes committed on or after that date. The new law didn't affect Hayes and Komisarjevsky, whose crimes had occurred in 2007. They remained on death row. But in 2015, the Connecticut Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in a case called State versus Santiago. The court held that executing prisoners for crimes committed before the 2012 repeal would constitute cruel and unusual punishment under the Connecticut state constitution. All death sentences were to be converted to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. In June 2016, Stephen Hayes was resentenced by Judge John Blue to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of release, plus an additional 106 years on related charges. Judge Blue's words at resentencing were final and absolute. With the gravity of these crimes and the depravity of your character, nothing more needs to be said. On July 26, 2016, Joshua Komisarjevsky received the same sentence, 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of release. Both men will die in prison. There will be no parole hearings, no chances for release, no possibility of freedom. The Cheshire home invasion stands as one of the most brutal crimes in American history. It exposed failures in the parole system, sparked debates about the death penalty, and left a community forever scarred. But perhaps more importantly, it showed us the preciousness of life and the devastating consequences when evil goes unchecked. Dr. William Petit survived physically, but he lost everything that mattered most. In the years following the tragedy, he has shown remarkable resilience. He has since remarried and had children, working tirelessly to honor his first family's memory through continued charitable work. The Petit Family Foundation continues to support causes that were dear to Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela, particularly in the areas of education and multiple sclerosis research. William has become a powerful advocate for victims' rights and criminal justice reform. He has testified before legislative committees, spoken at conferences, and worked with lawmakers to strengthen parole supervision and improve the criminal justice system's ability to protect the public. His advocacy helped shape Connecticut's response to violent crime, including stricter parole guidelines and enhanced monitoring of repeat offenders. The parole board faced intense scrutiny. Questions arose about risk assessment, supervision protocols, and whether warning signs had been missed or ignored. The case became a catalyst for reform, with new legislation passed to tighten parole requirements, increase supervision of high-risk offenders, and provide better training for parole officers in identifying dangerous behavior patterns. The death penalty debate that followed the Connecticut Supreme Court's 2015 ruling was equally contentious. Many victims' rights advocates, including Dr. Petit himself, believed that Hayes and Komisarjevsky deserved execution. They argued that the brutality of the crimes warranted the ultimate punishment, and that converting their death sentences to life imprisonment represented a failure of justice. Others saw the Connecticut Supreme Court's decision as a principled stand against capital punishment regardless of the heinousness of the crime. The court reasoned that once Connecticut had decided the death penalty was wrong going forward, it would be inconsistent and cruel to continue executing prisoners for older crimes. The debate continues to this day, with the Petit case serving as the primary example used by both sides. Jennifer, Haley and Michaela Petit were extraordinary people whose lives were stolen by two men who chose violence, cruelty, and murder. Jennifer was more than a nurse and a mother. She was a caregiver who touched countless lives at Cheshire Academy. Students remembered her kindness, her dedication, and her ability to make everyone feel cared for even as she battled her own illness. Haley was on the cusp of greatness. Her acceptance to Dartmouth, her athletic achievements, her leadership roles, all pointed to a young woman who would have made significant contributions to society. Her dedication to MS fundraising showed a maturity and compassion beyond her years. The world lost not just a bright student, but a future leader in medicine and advocacy. Michaela, at just 11 years old, had already shown the creativity and warmth that would have defined her life. Her love of cooking, her eagerness to take over her sister's fundraising work, her excitement about starting middle school, these were the dreams of a child whose future was limitless. That future was stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. They deserved to grow old, to achieve their dreams, to make their mark on the world. Instead, they became symbols, reminders that evil exists, that vigilance matters, and that justice, though sometimes imperfect, must always strive to protect the innocent.